Small groups are so elementary, right? Not necessarily. Not only can small groups work in middle school, but they should be used if you really want to accelerate student growth. Not all of your students are at the same place academically. That's not a shocker, right? But common instructional approaches are really to only target one group. And the problem with that is that while we're feeding one group, we're starving all the other students that deserve to accelerate their growth too. To make matters worse, one of the reasons why we use this instructional approach, why we just push the content, is because we feel pressured to keep pace so that we can get all the content done by the end of the year by the time testing rolls around, because we feel so pressured to have good test scores. But in doing this, when we get to the end of the year, we realize that the test scores are still not where we need them to be. So a better way is to use some of your instructional practice time to push small group, and here's how to do it. In the last video, we talked about management, so I'll link that at the end so you can check that out if you haven't seen it. But one of the big reasons I hear why middle school teachers don't want to push small group is because of the management issue. How am I gonna manage my 30 plus students in small groups that this group is talking, this group is throwing things, this group is getting up out of their seat? I can't just sit down and be with one group while there's so many things going on in other places. So my advice here is that you practice first. So before I get into the how to effectively use small group, the first thing I want you to do is practice. When the year is starting, at the beginning of the year, or whenever you're deciding to try to roll out this small group thing, I want you to practice just what small group even looks like. So break your students up into groups and allow them to work on something that they can do independently. If it's the beginning of the year, maybe it's an all about me or something like that. If we're moving later or throughout the year or whenever, maybe it's a mindset development activity. Maybe it's what dream do you have for the class? Or maybe it's sharing your vision. Just something the students can do independently so that you can just focus on management. So when the students are in their groups, I want you to just pop around the classroom addressing certain things. This group, you guys are going to be a little too loud. If we're doing small group, I need you at a voice level 1, or I need your voices to be lower. Whatever it is, allow them to go through a couple of small group activities, maybe a couple of class periods, maybe a couple of days. Maybe this is a process that takes some time to roll out. Only focusing on the management side of the small groups. Everything that they're doing is something that they can do without you. And after you get the management down, after you get to the point where you can put them in small groups and you could just sit down if you wanted to for 20, 30 minutes and they would continue moving like a well-oiled machine, then you introduce the content. And let me show you how to do that. So in your class, remember, the lesson should be no more than 15 minutes. So after you deliver your 15-minute or less lesson, then you want to deliver a lesson check. Now this isn't the exit ticket, but this is going to see if students receive the lesson that I just gave. Because you're going to have some students that get it right away and they're able to take what you taught them and go practice on their own and go develop. Then you're going to have some students that they kind of got what you were teaching, but there's still a couple of misconceptions. They need you to touch a couple of more things before they're able to really take it and move with it. And then you're going to have some students that are just completely lost. That's going to happen all the time. And customarily, if we skip this phase, if we don't do the small group portion, what we typically do here is we do the I do, you do, we do. So after direct instruction, we go and start rolling it out. But then only one of those groups are ready to move on to the independent practice, because you still have some students that are going to have those misconceptions and you still have some students that are completely lost. So what you want to do is do the check here so you can decide which students are ready to move on, which students need a little bit of clarification, and which students need to pause. And that's how you determine who's in which group. So those who mastered it, they can move on out to work either independently or collaboratively, your choice. Those who need a little bit more clarification around a couple of things, maybe that's the group that they're working together. You give them another practice problem just like the one you just went over. Or you have them review the practice problem that you just did. Or you have them look at the notes again. Or you have them go back through the slide or clear up whatever misconceptions, maybe just one or two little things that they need to be pointed out. But you have to clear that up before they can move on to the next thing. And then in the other group, they need to go way back. What you want to do is spend your time with this group backtracking to find where that jump off point was. I call it the jump off point. Go back to find out where the point of confusion began. And if you're in a 6th grade class, it may be like a 4th grade standard that they got confused about. That's okay. With that group, you're going to spend time going back to figure out where is it that you got lost. That's what you're going to address in that small group. Then at the end of the class, after small groups, you still want to do an exit ticket, an actual exit ticket that addresses the standards similar to the lesson check did earlier, but now we're addressing it again. And now what you're doing is you're seeing who definitely has it now, who still needs a little bit of clarification, and who's still lost, because now that's going to inform what tomorrow looks like. So you're deciding who knows enough about protons to now move into electrons tomorrow. And fun fact, I wanted to be a science teacher. I don't know if you can tell, but I love science. I wanted to be a science teacher, but at the college I went to, in order to be a science teacher, I would have to be a bioeducation major. And I was like, if I had to be a bio major, I'm going to med school. There's no way I'm going to be a bio major and then stick with education. I still feel some type of way about being a math major and watching all my students all my friends becoming engineers. But whatever, I chose the right path. But I will let you know that in my heart, I wanted to be a science teacher, but I chose math. So after you give the exit ticket, how do you decide when to move on? In the description below, I'm going to give you this PDF that you can use, maybe like a poster in your class, or maybe just use for your reference. But it goes through what I'm about to say right now, and it lets you know how to know when to move on, how to know when to pause, move forward with caution, and how to know when to stay just a little bit. And you can move on when 70% of your students have shown mastery over the content that you taught today. 70% of your students show mastery, you can move on. The reason why 70% is that number is because you are still going to continue to reloop. You are still going to continue to cycle, and you're still going to present these things in the warm-ups, in the launch, in homework, in practice. So you don't need to have 100% of them mastered right here, right now to move forward. 70% is a comfortable enough number for you to say, I can move on into the next thing because I know that I'm going to continue cycling back to what we're doing today. And I just have to be really cognizant about that 30% and continue to help pull them up. If 50 to 60% of these students master it, now we want to pause, we want to caution, because that means that a good portion of your class still has some misconceptions around what it is that you taught today. So in that moment, I suggest that you don't go forward full steam ahead, but maybe tomorrow you take a little bit of time before going into the next lesson to clear up some misconceptions about today's. Maybe that's something that could be addressed rather quickly. All right, so maybe you address some of the common misconceptions, do another assessment, and when they show that they're ready to move on, then we can move on or something like that. But you don't want to just go full steam ahead with only 50 to 60% of your class being with you. And then if less than 50% of your students show mastery on the exit ticket, you got to stop. Because that means more than half your class is confused. So you cannot, in good conscience, that's malpractice. You cannot, in good conscience, move forward tomorrow because more than half your class is still confused. So own it. It's okay. You didn't quite deliver what you thought you were going to deliver in today's lesson. That's fine. Next time that you have those students, address the same thing. So you now have to hit a hard pause, go back to the standard that you were teaching today, look at it. Maybe I need to chunk it a little bit smaller. Maybe if we were doing adding scientific notation and subtracting with scientific notation, maybe I just need to focus in on the adding at once and then subtracting another time. Whatever it is, you really just want to make sure that you don't move forward into multiplying and dividing scientific notation until you clear these things up. And the biggest question I get when I talk about this is people ask, doesn't that cause some sort of segregation within the class? Especially in middle school, aren't students going to make fun of each other? Aren't they eventually going to start poking at each other because you got to work with the teacher all the time and I get to work independently? And the answer that I like to give, in all honesty, in reality, two things. One, the teacher should float around because you don't just want to sit with the low kids all the time. You do also want to pop in on the higher kids and make sure you can address their questions, concerns, and continuing to challenge them, and that they're also definitely working. As they're working independently, sometimes they can get distracted. So you do want to spend time popping over to different groups, not just remain stationary with a small group. But let me also just say this. As the moral authority in that classroom, you need to make sure that you set up a culture that allows for that to be okay. We have to be way more intentional about allowing students to recognize other student differences and to be okay with that. Everybody learns at a different pace. And in your class, students should be able to recognize that we're all working towards a common goal. We're all just want to be the best version of ourselves. And for me, it looks like independent practice. For that student over there, it looks like sitting with the teacher. For that student over there, it looks like sitting with the peer. And that's okay. We all learn at different speeds. We all learn at different times. We all do different things, and everybody's different, and that's okay. And if you're thinking that this could never work with your students, I just want to urge you to try it. If it doesn't work, oh well, right? But I believe, as you can see on the shirt, oh wells are a lot better than what ifs. Because if you watch this video and you sit back and you're like, man, what if that actually works? But you don't try it, then you'll never know. But if you try it and it doesn't work, oh well, hop back on YouTube and find a different strategy. But what if you do try it and it does work? Like, that's an amazing thing, which is why I'm all for just going for it. So in the next video, we're gonna talk about how to challenge each student appropriately. So subscribe so you don't miss that. But in the meantime, check out this video right here about how to quiet a noisy class, something that hopefully you don't have an issue with, but you can definitely check it out. Hopefully it helps you out with your small groups. I'll see you in the next one.